Hello and welcome. Making a little video here about QLab and AppleScript. We're going to take a script and update it a little bit. It's a pretty handy script, but I think we can make it a little better. Let's jump right in and see how that works. So you can see we've got our first queue here is called create 5-second fade in selected queue with the hotkey of Control F. Let's go ahead and run that and see it in action. When we do that, we get a fade in of movie 1. First off, let's go back and look at movie 1 and we see that the opacity was zeroed out. And then if we look at the opacity of the fade in, that's set to 100. If we go down here and we look at an audio cue, we'll run it as well. See fade in audio and oh, that was my fault. I didn't reset this before filming. Let's go ahead and make this 0. Sorry about that, team. Delete this. Run that again, and we'll see that the fade in gets the level from the original cue, and the original cue gets set to 0, or excuse me, minus infinity. Um, so it's a pretty handy cue. It's probably the hotkey that I use the most, but I think we can make it a little better. One of the things we see here is that it defaults to 100% opacity. I think we can make that where it'll take the opacity the same way it takes the audio from the audio cues. And there's a couple other little things we can clean up. So let's jump into the code. Um, so here's the original cues. I borrowed from these. This was found on the scripts and macros page contributed by Rich Walsh. If you've never checked out the Rich Walsh template, you should. You can find it at allthatyouhear.com. So this is the original one. This is what I copied pretty directly. Over the years, I updated it a little, but not too much. One thing I had not noticed, I'm going to be adding, like the opacity, we're going to be also be copying the pre-weight from the original cue and adding that to the fade so that if you're doing any kind of fancy group stuff, this will not error on you. So here is my original one. This is my modified version from the script that Rich Walsh contributed to the QLab Scripts and Macros page. Um, you see a couple things here. User duration, that's how long the fade's going to be. User bump is something that was never used. That's an artifact, so we'll be getting rid of that. Here's where we set up all the properties. Then we make the new script. We apply everything. And then if it's a video, we do the opacity. And this is actually another artifact. This is an error. The QName string is already being named, so we're going to get rid of that as well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and just copy all of this into a new file because I don't want to lose any of this work until I know that the new file is functioning. So let's go ahead and save this as new fade in. We'll make it an AppleScript. Hit save, paste all that in. All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to update this. This is old, so let's change that to 4.6.9, and it is March 2021, and we are now working in QLab 4. So that's how old this script is. If you're not familiar with this layout, sometimes you'll see a script and it just says tell application QLab. I recommend using this full version right here. If you use this com.53.qlab.4, then when the version changes, QLab will automatically update your script. If you just have QLab or QLab 3 or something like that, QLab 4 without doing this fancy version, then your script will break on version changes. So anyways, back to editing. First thing I said, we're going to get rid of that user bump. We don't need that anymore. And we're going to get rid of this. We don't need this anymore. So what are some things that are missing? What are some things that we would like? We said we're going to add the pre-weight. We're also going to add the opacity. Down here, I want to add in here, I want to make this take a fade as well. And then we'll need to update all of these properties. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to make a new block here around this new queue set level. I don't know if I feel like this is a change that I've missed, but somewhere along the ways, groups, if you tried to change the volume of the level of a group, it would fail silently, nothing would happen, it wouldn't break your script or anything. But when I just tried running this one, I tried running it on a group and it did break it. So we'll add an if block here for groups, so that if it's not a group, try and do the sound stuff. But if it is a group, then we'll ignore that. And then we're also just going to clean all of this up because we've got a bunch of stuff that's not ordered the way you probably would like it. Like first off, this if test should probably be the first thing, because if the fade's not in one of these, then we're not going to execute. Or excuse me, if the original queue is not in one of these types, then we're not going to execute any of these commands. Um, so anyways, that's the basic rundown of what we're going to be doing. Let's see how we can code this out. Go back up here to the top. We're going to start by leaving user duration, original queue type. Um, excuse me, no, we're not. We're going to move the duration. We're going to move the duration down. What we want is we want to get this if line, we want to get this up as early as we can, because we want to break if we're not using it. So we're going to go ahead and delete this. We're going to go up. We need to have the queue type of original queue before we can do that check. So we're going to go up 8 lines and paste that in here. So we need to set original queue to the last item first. That'll grab whatever is currently what is currently selected, and if there is a range of queues selected, it will pick the last item, because the script will only work on one queue at a time. And we'll grab the queue type of that queue. And once we have that queue type, we can run our test. So this is now good. Um, So set queue name string to fade in plus the queue name of original queue, that's fine. Set user duration, that's fine. We need to add a line about the pre-wait, so let's change this line to set pre-wait. Oh no, I'm going to store the pre-wait in a variable. We'll say that variable is my pre-wait to pre-wait of original queue. We also need to store the opacity, so set my opacity to opacity of original queue. I'll get rid of that comment. The continue mode. So again, we only want to do sound stuff if we're working on a queue that's not a group. So I'm going to take this line and I'm going to move this down to our sound group. I'm sorry, our sound block. And then we'll go back. Oh, and we'll need to take this one as well. Take that down there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and fix the indentation on here. I don't really like editing in the script editor if I'm not actually actively developing. I know most of what's going on here is going to work, so I'm not worried about error messages right now. When I'm writing new scripts, I do develop in the script editor, but since it doesn't have a dark mode, I try and avoid that as much as possible. So let's grab all of this down, J, and well, block that in, that's much better. Okay, so we were up here at set continue mode. So again, all of these things are, I lied. Opacity, we want to move this one down here to our video block. So go back up here where we were. All of these properties are properties that will exist regardless if a queue is a group, an audio, or a video. And we actually want to add fade to this, because you can fade a fade. Yes. So all of these properties are things that exist for all of these types of queues. So we're happy to do that on its own. We don't need to spec that off into a special block. Um, then we'll come down here and we'll make a new type of queue. We'll make it a fade, and we'll set new queue to the last item, which will be the queue that we just created. We will apply the properties from this block up here. So up here we can add, also now we can add pre-weight is my pre-weight. And that's all that we can add right now. So then we'll need to add this block. If it's not a group, we'll add a block to do the audio stuff. So if queue type of new queue is not group, well, then, gotta remember that that then keyword. Go down, we'll add an end if, and then we'll go back up and we'll take too far. Go back up and take these indented too far. Okay, so now we've got our nice little sound block that will only execute if the queue is not a group. Oh, cat went out to the hallway. It'll only execute if the queue is not a group. I'm also going to change this to minus infinity. I like that better. I feel like that has a better chance of not having any issues. Minus 70 is probably never going to be audible, but just to be safe. Sorry, let's look over this whole thing now. I think it's complete. We've got if queue type is not group, so if it's not a group, then we'll execute this. We'll set our original level to the original queue's master volume. Then we will zero out the master volume of the original queue, and we will set the level of the new queue to that value. And then we'll do the same thing basically for the video. So the video, this is where it's hard copied to 100. So let's change this to my opacity. And then this should be all good. Let's get rid of these comments. Comments that we don't need anymore. And we'll get rid of that blank line down here. And all of these blank lines. Okay, so, more blanks. I think that should be good. I think this is our new one, so this should now work on group audio, video, and fade. It will take the pre-weight and the opacity of the original queue as well as the volume, the master volume. It will store those values. It will make a new queue. It will zero out all of those values in the original queue and apply the user settings to the new queue. Let's save this. Let's check and make sure it compiles. And it does. Let's go back to QLab. We will select the queue. We will make sure that it is at 75% opacity so that we're making sure we're getting the correct opacity. We're also going to set an audio queue at minus 20 just so it's not a default value and we know we're getting something specific. So we'll run each of these individually. First, I'll run this one from the editor. I always like to do this before I move it into a queue just to make sure it's working. So we do this, and then we'll go back and check QLab, and we see we have fade in movie 1, which is at 75% opacity, and then movie 1 is now at 0. It's great. Looks like it works. And the cat is coming back. Hello, kitty. Looks like it works. Let's go back to the code editor and grab all of this code and copy it, and we'll come back into QLab, and now we'll populate this into a new script. Make sure this works in QLab. I do not normally have issues transferring scripts from the editor to QLab. Every so often it does happen, so I always make sure I run things in the editor, or I'm sorry, in QLab before moving on. Um, to be fair, when there is an issue that exists in QLab but not when running from the editor, it's usually something that I don't understand, and so when that happens, I go to the group and I ask the big brains. So this queue, we're gonna disarm our old fade. We don't want that one triggering anymore. We're gonna name this new fade in. Ooh, that's whatever. It's fine. It's just for testing. We're gonna give this the hotkey of Control F. We're gonna come down to this audio queue and we're gonna chest Control F, and then we see we've got -20. There we go. And then the audio is 0 dot and -infinity. Um, And then I just had this one just to test it on a group. We can test it. Group, it fades it in, and then if you have a fade inside a group, that also works. Let's go ahead and give this a value so that we can test fade to fade. This one now has a value. Oh, because this was a relative fade. Let's set this to an absolute and give it a value. And then let's delete this. Let's see what happens when we fade. Plus 12. Oh, was that because I was going too high? Let's give this a value. There we go. Let's try this one more time. Fade to fade. And there we see it takes the fade value, the master volume from the original cue, excuse me, and then it zeroes out the original fade. So that works on fades, it works on groups and in groups, works on audio, works on video. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to call this one done. Thanks for tuning in, and have a All right, we're back already. I did a quick watch of the video and noticed we made a couple errors. By we, I mean I. So you may have noticed it when I ran the queue on the test group. It did error. Oh, helps if I'm back in QLab. It did error. It turns out that I did made a mess up in the code. So let's go back over and see what I messed up. If queue type of new queue, this is our fade. I need to change this to original queue. Um, so that was the only error I made. There was one thing that I forgot to add that I wanted to get. Um, I personally like to only have numbered queues be called queues, or at least things that are in the regular course of the queue stack, like one regular numbers. Sometimes I'll name fade ins or I'll number fade ins fade in with the queue number or something, and that's fine. But what I don't want is I don't want this where we have Q 1.5 is one of my fade-ins, which is almost certainly going to be called as part of a group and not an individual call. So by default, I'm going to go ahead and take away the Q number of our fade. So let's go back over into QLab. Oh, let's actually save this, copy this, bring it back over into QLab. And then now, if we run this on our group queue, we see it runs, we do not error, and we do not have a queue number. So that was it. Those were just a couple little oversights on my part. Sorry about that, but I think this guy should be all good to go. I'll be uploading this show file and this script to my GitHub, which will also have my template. Check it out, and if you haven't, check out the Rich Walsh template at allthatyouhear.com. Thanks for tuning in, and have a nice day.